Billionaire CEO yells at immigrant lady for touching his Ferrari. Moments later, she fixes the engine. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are, and subscribe to our channel to receive new stories every day that will touch your heart. I hope you enjoy the story. The city of New York pulsed under the relentless sun, a teeming cauldron of ambition and dreams. From the penthouse of his mirrored Manhattan high-rise, Nathaniel Brooks, 38, the tech titan behind Dynasty Tech, surveyed the urban sprawl with a conqueror's cold detachment. His life was a meticulously crafted masterpiece of control, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, a designer wardrobe, and a car collection that felt more like a sacred sanctuary than a mere garage. His latest acquisition, a Ferrari 488 Pista Rosso Corsa, gleamed in his private, climate-controlled parking bay, a crimson jewel symbolizing every victory, every dollar he'd amassed. Yet beneath all this dazzling wealth, an insidious emptiness echoed, a pervasive loneliness that even the thunderous roar of a V8 engine couldn't quite silence. He often found himself staring out at the city, wondering if anyone truly saw him or just the empire he'd built. Miles away, in the vibrant, unpretentious heart of Queens, Zoe Castillo's life was a symphony of clanking wrenches and the rich, sweet scent of motor oil. At 28, her hands, calloused and strong from countless hours under hoods, moved with an almost artistic grace. Her smile, rare but brilliant, could illuminate the darkest corner of any workshop. Zoe was an urban legend in her own right, a master mechanic in a field dominated by men, an immigrant who, with her family, had arrived in the US, seeking a future, and who had forged her reputation bolt by painstaking bolt from the ground up. Her workshop, Castillo Auto Arts, was a haven for discerning collectors, a place where classic beauties and exotic supercars came to life under her intuitive touch. She'd learned every secret, every whisper of an engine, from her late father, a humble mechanic who dreamed big. Zoe carried his legacy with fierce pride and unparalleled talent. On this particular day, relishing a rare moment of respite, Zoe wandered through a wealthy Manhattan neighborhood, not looking at storefronts, but soaking in the architectural grandeur, admiring the intricate ironwork on old brownstones and the way the light played off modern glass facades. Fate, however, had other, more confrontational plans. In front of an avant-garde art gallery, a small crowd had gathered, their murmurs of admiration focused on a breathtaking sight, a scarlet Ferrari gleaming under the afternoon sun. It was, of course, Nathaniel's Pista. Driven by an innate passion for her craft, Zoe drifted closer, her trained eyes meticulously cataloguing every curve, every vent, every perfect line of the machine. It wasn't just a car, it was a testament to engineering prowess. Without thinking, her hand almost instinctively reached out. Her fingers, accustomed to the cool resilience of metal and the precise friction of an engine block, gently brushed the flawless paintwork, a soft, almost reverent caress from one artisan to another masterpiece. Then, a voice sharp and cutting like a freshly honed blade sliced through the murmuring air. "What do you think you're doing? Get your hands off my car now!" Nathaniel Brooks stormed forward, his bespoke suit barely containing the fury that distorted his otherwise composed features. His blue eyes, usually calm and calculating, now blazed with righteous indignation. He saw a young woman who in his mind appeared simple, common, far too ordinary to be touching his most prized possession. His prejudices, dormant but potent, ignited into a blazing inferno of outrage. Do you have any idea what that's worth? Do you even know what this is?" He spat the words, his tone laced with a condescension that would typically make anyone wilt. "An immigrant like you shouldn't even be near a car like this." Each syllable was laced with venom, hitting Zoe like a physical blow. Humiliation burned a hot flush across Zoe's face, a deep, internal heat. her fists clenched at her sides, but her dignity was an unyielding shield. She took a slow, deliberate breath, remembering her father's quiet lessons on resilience and self-worth. "Sir, I was simply admiring the engineering," Zoe replied, her voice remarkably calm, yet imbued with an underlying strength that surprised even Nathaniel. She wouldn't back down. "It's an extraordinary machine, and yes, I understand exactly what this car is. In fact, I can see it has serious problems with its fuel injection system and clutch, sir. If you continue driving it like this, you'll destroy the engine." Nathaniel let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. The sound was brittle, full of mockery. "Oh, really? And you just know that, do you, by looking at it from a distance? Are you suddenly a roadside mechanic now, miss?" Before Zoe could formulate a retort, Nathaniel's phone buzzed with an insistent, urgent vibration. It was a distinctive ringtone, one he reserved for emergencies. The caller ID flashed, stark and demanding. "Elite Auto, urgent." He snatched it, irritation marring his brow. "Mr. Brooks, it's urgent." Mr. Henderson, the service manager from Elite Auto, sounded panicked. "Your Ferrari 488 Pista has a critical engine failure. A complex system breakdown, Mr. Brooks. We need a specialist immediately, someone who truly understands high-performance Italian engines. It's something only Zoe Castillo's team can handle." Nathaniel's world tilted. His face, moments ago flushed with anger, now drained of all color. The mention of the name Zoe Castillo echoed in his ears, a chilling parallel to the woman standing directly in front of him. "And the only person we trust for this is in Manhattan right now, heading to our branch for an emergency repair that could take hours. A professional named Zoe Castillo." The phone slipped from Nathaniel's trembling hand, clattering against the cobblestones with a dull thud. His eyes, wide with sudden realization, locked onto the woman before him. He glanced at his pristine Ferrari, then back at Zoe, who was watching him with an expression that was a complex mix of understanding and a touch of almost pity. "I believe," Zoe said softly, her eyes holding his with a quiet power, as she calmly bent down, picked up his discarded phone, and extended it back to him. "That would be me." The air seemed to leave Nathaniel's lungs. The powerful billionaire, accustomed to absolute control, now stood utterly defenseless before the woman he had just so cruelly insulted. What would he do? Would his pride consume him entirely, or would he be forced to confront the truth and the crushing magnitude of his profound error? The fate of his cherished Ferrari, and perhaps unknowingly, the very heart of his own lonely existence, now rested in the capable hands of the immigrant he had so easily dismissed. The stage was set for a collision that would irrevocably alter both their lives. The silence on the sidewalk after Zoe's revelation was deafening, a stark contrast to the distant hum of Manhattan's ceaseless energy. Nathaniel stood frozen, the frantic pulse of the city a mere murmur against the roaring disbelief in his ears. The woman he had just publicly humiliated, labeling her a worthless immigrant, was the sole individual capable of saving his $500,000 supercar. The sheer magnitude of his embarrassment clawed at his throat, suffocating him with its bitter irony. His carefully constructed facade of control was crumbling, brick by humiliating brick. "You're Zoe Castillo?" he stammered, the words barely a rasp from his suddenly parched throat. His mind reeled, frantically trying to reconcile the sharp, disdainful words he'd uttered just moments ago with the chilling realization that she was the renowned expert he desperately needed. Zoe held his gaze, her dark eyes unblinking, betraying no hint of the anger that still simmered just beneath her composed exterior. "That's right, Mr. Brooks," she stated, her voice calm, devoid of any emotional tremor, yet sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "And you are the client with a critical engine problem who just spent 10 minutes telling me not to touch your car." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle between them, challenging him silently, daring him to utter another disrespectful syllable. The air thrummed with a tension thick enough to cut. Nathaniel's stomach churned, a knot of acute discomfort tightening in his gut. What could he possibly say? How could he mend this catastrophic breach? He, the man who always had an answer, always a cutting retort, was utterly paralyzed. His carefully cultivated image of infallible power lay shattered at his feet. But the Ferrari's engine, at that moment, felt far weaker than his wounded pride. His crucial meeting that evening, the acquisition of Aegis Dynamics, hinged on his flawless appearance, and that included arriving in his gleaming, perfectly running Ferrari. He needed that car. I need you to fix it," he finally managed to push out, the words catching in his throat like shards of glass. The admission tasted like ash in his mouth, a bitter pill of dependence. Zoe simply nodded, her expression seamlessly shifting back into cold, efficient professionalism. The hint of a challenge, of personal affront, vanished, replaced by a steely focus. "Mr. Henderson from Elite Auto said the situation is urgent, the fuel injection is compromised, and the clutch could seize at any moment. We'll need to get the car to a proper facility. Does your garage have the necessary equipment?" Her gaze swept over his expensive suit, then back to his face, a silent assessment. Nathaniel hesitated, a fleeting internal battle playing out. The thought of this woman, whom he had so deeply insulted, within the pristine, sacred confines of his private automotive sanctuary, was deeply unsettling. It felt like an invasion. But the urgency was undeniable, a cold, hard fact overriding his wounded ego. "Yes, my penthouse. The garage is fully equipped." He gestured vaguely towards the gleaming high-rise behind them, his voice tight. "Excellent. But in its current state, the car can't be driven by just anyone," Zoe stated, her hand extended, palm open. Her fingers, though slender, radiated an almost intimidating competence. "The keys, please." A shiver of trepidation traced its way down Nathaniel's spine. She wanted to drive his Ferrari. The Ferrari he regarded as an untouchable temple, a symbol of his untouchable status. This was a double blow to his ego. Not only was he forced to acknowledge her skill, but he had to entrust his most prized possession to the very person he had scorned. He handed over the keys, his hand visibly trembling, the cold metal a stark contrast to the heat of his humiliation. Zoe took the keys with a practiced, fluid motion. She moved towards the driver's side, her steps confident, unhurried. Sliding into the low-slung seat, she adjusted it and the mirrors with surprising familiarity, as if the $500,000 supercar was merely an extension of her own body, an old friend she knew intimately. The engine roared to life with a deep, resonant growl, a sound that usually filled Nathaniel with immense pride, but now seemed to mock his ignorance, his arrogance. Through the tinted windshield, he watched her meticulously check the dashboard instruments, her face serious and utterly concentrated. She lowered the window, her eyes, dark and knowing, meeting his. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on her lips. "I imagine you can find your own way home, Mr. Brooks." Nathaniel felt utterly ridiculous standing there on the bustling sidewalk, a billionaire in a crumpled suit, watching a woman he had so grievously misjudged effortlessly command his most valuable possession. Zoe, with a practiced flick of her wrist, eased the Ferrari smoothly into the stream of traffic, maneuvering the powerful vehicle with the same effortless precision one might handle a commuter car. Nathaniel remained rooted to the spot, watching the scarlet blur disappear into the urban landscape, the image of Zoe at the wheel, calm, confident, magnificent, burned into his mind. She was undeniably magnificent. He had just obliterated the fragile bridge he had barely begun to build. Could there possibly be any form of redemption for a man who had acted with such egregious arrogance and prejudice? He had prided himself on his foresight, his intellect, his ability to see opportunities where others saw nothing. Yet, in the span of mere minutes, he had proven himself blind to the most obvious, the most profound talent, because it was cloaked in circumstances that challenged his narrow worldview. The question hung heavy in the humid New York air. Was it too late to learn to see? Nathaniel's arrival at his luxury condominium was a blur of raw anxiety and simmering shame. He'd barely registered the hushed greetings from the doorman, his mind consumed by the image of Zoe at the wheel of his Ferrari. His car was already in the subterranean garage, ferried there by the building's diligent valets, and he knew Zoe would be waiting. The thought made his stomach clench. Her presence, even at a distance, radiated a quiet competence that somehow diminished him further. The elevator ride up to his 42nd floor garage, a gleaming testament to automotive excellence, felt like an agonizing eternity. Gleaming white walls, bespoke LED lighting, and diagnostic equipment costing more than most houses filled the expansive space. This sanctuary, once a source of immense pride, now felt stifling, oppressive, a gilded cage designed for his singular humiliation. He traced the fine stitching of his suit jacket, feeling the sudden clamminess of his palms. As the elevator doors swished open, Zoe was already there, meticulously arranging her tools on a portable cart, her movements precise and economical. She wore a simple dark green jumpsuit, practical and professional, a stark contrast to his crumpled, expensive suit. Her expertise was palpable, an aura that flowed from her as naturally as breath. Her trained eyes, missing nothing, scanned the array of high-tech machinery, and he watched as she gave a slight, approving nod towards the state-of-the-art snap-on diagnostic station. "Impressive setup," she admitted, her voice even, professional. Any hint of the previous encounter's resentment was carefully masked by her genuine appreciation for the equipment. "Most private garages are just for show. This one's actually functional." She glanced at him, a fleeting, almost imperceptible assessment in her dark eyes. Nathaniel, still feeling profoundly out of place in his expensive attire, shuffled awkwardly. "I designed it myself," he managed, a faint note of unexpected melancholy entering his voice. "I used to work on my own cars, before the company consumed everything. Haven't really touched a wrench in about 5 years." He felt a pang of longing for a simpler time, a ghost of a passion he'd buried under layers of corporate responsibility. Zoe met his gaze, and for a brief, startling moment, he saw a flicker of something akin to understanding, perhaps even empathy in her eyes. It was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual mask of cool efficiency. "Well, today, Mr. Brooks, you get to watch a professional work," she stated, her voice firm, as she deftly unlatched the Ferrari's sleek hood. The powerful engine, still radiating a faint heat, was revealed in all its complex glory. "Fair warning, this is going to take time. The integration of the injection system in these models is incredibly complex. Every single connection needs to be perfect, or the entire system fails." Nathaniel unconsciously loosened his tie, a rare, almost unconscious gesture of discomfort for him. "How long are we talking?" "Minimum of 3 hours. Could be 5 or 6 if I find additional issues," she replied, snapping on a pair of latex gloves with precise, practiced movements. The faint scent of latex mingled with the rich smell of leather and fuel. "The real question is, can you stay in the same room with me for that long without saying something you'll regret again?" The bluntness of her question struck Nathaniel like a physical blow. He felt a hot flush creep up his neck and face. I deserve that," he admitted quietly, his gaze dropping to the gleaming concrete floor. The words felt inadequate, a pathetic attempt to bridge the chasm his arrogance had created. "Yes, you do," Zoe responded, her voice unwavering as she began to methodically connect a thick diagnostic cable to the Ferrari's main computer module. But deserving something and learning from it are two different things. She activated the diagnostic system, and the high-tech garage filled with a soft electronic hum, as complex parameters of the engine and intricate electrical flowcharts began to scroll across multiple large screens. "Wow," Nathaniel murmured, drawn closer despite himself. The sheer volume and detail of the data were overwhelming, even to his analytical mind. "I've never seen diagnostics this detailed. Most mechanics can't afford equipment like this," Zoe explained, her tone warming subtly as she spoke about her craft, a faint passion lighting her features. "But when you're working on vehicles worth more than most people's homes, precision isn't optional. It's survival. One wrong setting, and you've bricked an engine worth hundreds of thousands." As she worked, Nathaniel found himself utterly fascinated. Her hands moved with surgical precision, disconnecting modules, testing connections with a multimeter, running intricate analyses. Every movement was purposeful, economical, the culmination of years of rigorous training and innate, undeniable talent. She was an artist, and the Ferrari was her canvas. "There," she said, pointing to a flickering readout on one of the screens. Her voice was crisp, professional. "See that voltage differential? The injection controller isn't receiving the correct signals from the main engine management system. It's like having two orchestras trying to play the same symphony with different conductors. They're out of sync." Despite the lingering humiliation, Nathaniel found himself drawn into her explanation, his CEO's mind intrigued by the technical challenge. What causes something like that? Could be anything. Faulty wiring, a corrupted software update, even vibration damage from aggressive driving. She paused, her dark eyes locking onto his with a significant pointed look. "Some people think expensive cars are indestructible toys rather than precision instruments. They push them beyond their limits, then wonder why they fail." Nathaniel had the decency to look genuinely abashed. He recalled the reckless speed he often hit on the deserted backroads upstate, the thrill of pushing the limit. "I suppose I must have pushed it harder than I should have." "Most of my clients do," Zoe said, her gaze returning to her work as she began carefully removing a series of delicate carbon fiber panels to access the controller deep within the engine bay. "They buy these cars for their egos, not for the engineering. They want the status, not the responsibility that comes with truly understanding and caring for it. Is that what you think I am?" Nathaniel's voice was low, tinged with a defensive edge. "Just another rich egocentric?" Zoe paused in her work, her head tilted slightly, considering her response with a deliberate slowness that made Nathaniel's pulse quicken. The whir of a cooling fan was the only sound in the vast garage. "This morning, yes," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "That's exactly what I thought. The question now is, are you going to prove me right, or are you going to surprise me?" The challenge hung in the air between them, sharp and undeniable. Nathaniel felt a strange stirring in his chest, something entirely different from the familiar heat of anger or the cold grip of control. It was a sensation he hadn't recognized in years, a fragile, almost terrifying glimmer of hope. What would he do to surprise her? The hum of the Ferrari's diagnostics was the only witness to the silent, unspoken promise of a potential new beginning. The Ferrari, a usually compliant marvel of engineering, stubbornly resisted Zoe's ministrations. The problem, she quickly discovered, ran deeper than initial diagnostics suggested, demanding a complete firmware reprogramming of the intricate injection controller. Hours bled into one another. The brilliant New York afternoon sun outside his penthouse garage giving way to the inky darkness of night. The soft, soulful strains of Alicia Keys emanating from the garage's discreet, high-end sound system filled the vast space. The music, carefully chosen by the building's automated playlist, ironically broke the tense silence, weaving an unexpected atmosphere of shared solitude and emerging camaraderie between them. Nathaniel, still in his now rumpled suit, leaned against a polished tool cabinet, observing Zoe. She was utterly engrossed, a single bead of sweat tracing a path down her temple, catching the precise LED light. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, and a faint flush colored her cheeks, highlighting the intensity of her focus. Her hands moved with a practiced grace, fingers dancing over the diagnostic tablet's keyboard, then deftly manipulating wiring harnesses. He found himself mesmerized by her competence, by the quiet confidence in every gesture. "You really love cars, don't you?" Nathaniel finally asked, his voice softer, less guarded than any tone he'd used with her before. The question felt genuine, not a tactical maneuver, but a simple observation. Zoe glanced up, a small, weary smile gracing her lips. The intensity in her eyes softened. "Since I was a little girl, my father, he had a small shop in Brooklyn. Not Ferraris usually, more like dependable sedans and rusty pickups. But he taught me that every engine has a story, and if you know how to listen, it'll tell you exactly what it needs." A fleeting shadow crossed her face, a brief ripple of sorrow in her dark eyes. "He passed away 4 years ago. Cancer. He never got to see me working on cars like this." Her gaze drifted to the gleaming Ferrari, a wistful quality to her expression. Nathaniel felt an unfamiliar pang of empathy bloom in his chest, a strange, warm ache that he rarely, if ever, experienced. His own childhood losses were neatly compartmentalized, rarely acknowledged. "I'm sorry," he murmured, meaning it. The words felt foreign on his tongue. "He always said I had magic hands, that I could feel what was wrong even before the diagnostics confirmed it," Zoe continued, her fingers resuming their dance across the laptop keyboard as she meticulously reprogrammed the engine module. The faint clicking of the keys was the only sound for a moment. "Sometimes I still think he's here, guiding my hands, whispering the answers." A small, self-deprecating chuckle escaped her. Zoe's quiet confession touched Nathaniel deeply, stirring a buried longing within him. Almost unconsciously, he found himself sharing a piece of his own carefully guarded past. "My father was obsessed with cars too. Died when I was 16. A stroke. One day we were changing the oil on his old Mustang. The next, he was just gone." Nathaniel paused, the ancient pain echoing in his voice, surprising even himself with its raw honesty. "The worst part wasn't just losing him. It was watching my mother sell the Mustang weeks later. She said it was too painful, but for me, it was the only thing that still connected me to him. I promised myself then that one day I'd have cars no one could ever take from me." He looked at Zoe, a vulnerability in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "That's why I was so furious when you touched my Ferrari. It wasn't just about the car, it was more than that." Zoe paused her work completely, turning to face him fully. Her eyes, filled with a rare, unspoken understanding, met his. She saw the raw, exposed wound beneath his polished exterior. "I understand," she said softly, her voice compassionate, devoid of judgment. "You were running from the pain, trying to control everything so you wouldn't feel out of control again. And you, Miss Castillo," Nathaniel asked, feeling more exposed, more vulnerable than he ever had in his meticulously structured life. "You seem to have your entire life figured out." Zoe let out a short, somewhat melancholy laugh. "Far from it, Mr. Brooks. I've spent so many years proving I belong in spaces full of men who don't want me there, that I've forgotten how to trust someone who actually does want me around." Her gaze drifted, a hint of past hurt shadowing her expression. "I had a boyfriend 3 years ago. also a mechanic. For 6 months, I thought he truly saw me, saw my talent. But I found out he was taking credit for my work, telling clients I was just his assistant, that he was the real genius behind the repairs. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, filled with the echo of betrayal. Since then, I've kept things simple, professional, safe. Lonely, Nathaniel whispered, the word hanging heavy in the air. Yes, lonely, Zoe confirmed, her eyes meeting his once more, a shared recognition of their solitary existences. But lonely feels safer than betrayed. A comfortable silence settled between them, a fragile bubble of shared vulnerability in the gleaming, silent garage. It was a space that, hours before, had been merely a sterile workshop, but now it held the delicate seed of a genuine connection. Nathaniel felt a strange, stirring wave of emotion wash over him. He, the isolated billionaire, was connecting with a woman he had so profoundly misjudged, a woman who, in turn, was seeing him in a way no one else had in years, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a flawed, hurting human being. When you work on these cars, do you feel like you're talking to them? He asked, a genuine curiosity in his voice, a hint of wonder. Zoe's eyes lit up, the fatigue momentarily vanishing, replaced by pure, unadulterated passion. Yes, exactly like that. Every engine has its own personality. Some are stubborn, some are temperamental, some are sweet. The machines are honest. They don't lie about what they need. She returned to her work, but her movements were now lighter, imbued with a renewed energy. Maybe that's why I prefer working with cars to most people. She looked at him again, and for an instant the professional barrier between them dissolved completely. Nathaniel saw not just intelligence and strength and vulnerability, but something else, something that made his heart skip a beat. Most people, she confirmed softly, her gaze holding his, but perhaps not all people. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken possibilities. It was clear that what was unfolding between them went far beyond a mere car repair. Both felt it, a silent, profound recognition that their hearts, once isolated within their carefully constructed worlds, were beginning, tentatively, to reach out and find each other. The faint aroma of oil and cool metal mingled with the warm, human scent of shared vulnerability, creating an unexpected intimacy in the opulent garage. The soft hum of the Ferrari's diagnostic system filled the pristine garage, a sound that just hours earlier would have been Nathaniel's sole focus. Now his entire attention was fixed on Zoe, who meticulously finalized the reprogramming of the engine module. The air between them, thick with a newfound intimacy, stood in stark contrast to the hostility that had marked the beginning of their day. A fragile bubble of understanding and quiet connection had formed, a space where vulnerability had tentatively bloomed. But at precisely 9:47 p.m., the sharp ping of the penthouse elevator announcing its arrival shattered that delicate illusion. "Brooks, where the hell are you? We need to talk about the Singapore deal." Harrison Blackwell's clipped, impatient voice sliced through the garage's calm, echoing from the main living area. Nathaniel's face, already pale from the long hours and emotional revelations, blanched further. Harrison, his longtime business partner and pseudo-friend, was here. And with him, he knew, would be Robert Chun and William Morrison, key members of his company's board. The pillars of his carefully constructed world. They weren't supposed to be here until morning, he whispered to Zoe, his voice laced with a sudden palpable dread. Zoe quickly recoiled from the car's dashboard, her heart beginning to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The warmth that had filled the space evaporated, replaced by a chilling premonition. "Should I leave?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "No, let me handle this," Nathaniel responded, but Zoe could already see the transformation. His shoulders straightened, his jaw tightened, and his expression hardened. The familiar cold mask of the detached billionaire, the one she'd first encountered that morning, descended upon him like an impenetrable shield. Her heart sank, a familiar ache beginning to bloom in her chest. The three men strode into the garage, their expensive shoes clicking sharply on the polished floor. Their voices, once loud and demanding, died abruptly as they took in the scene. Nathaniel, in his disheveled designer suit, standing awkwardly close to Zoe, who was in her work jumpsuit, surrounded by highly specialized equipment. Harrison, a man in his late 50s with impeccably coiffed silver hair and eyes that perpetually held a thinly veiled disdain for anything not within his elite circle, fixed his gaze on Zoe with obvious disapproval. "Well, well, well," Harrison drawled, his voice dripping with thinly veiled condescension, his eyes moving slowly from Nathaniel to Zoe, then back again. "I can see why you've been unreachable all evening." A smirk played on his lips, hinting at far more than just annoyance over a missed business discussion. "Harrison, this is Ms. Castillo. She's the mechanic who—" Nathaniel began, trying to inject a note of professionalism, a hint of respect into his tone. "The help is still here?" Harrison interrupted, not even bothering to acknowledge Zoe's presence with a direct glance. His eyes remained fixed on Nathaniel. "It's nearly 10 o'clock, Brooks. Surely any maintenance issue has been resolved by now." Zoe felt the familiar prick of contempt, a sting she'd grown accustomed to in this male-dominated industry. But what truly wounded her was Nathaniel's reaction. She watched him visibly flinch, recoil, shrinking back into the perceived safety of his old self, the man who had humiliated her just that morning. It was a physical retraction, a surrender to the expectations of his peers. "The repair is complex," Nathaniel said, his voice rigid, lacking conviction. "It required extra time." "Complex?" Robert Chun scoffed, letting out a short, dismissive laugh. "How complex can it be? It's just a car, Nathaniel. Send it to the dealership tomorrow and let's focus on real business." His eyes flickered to Zoe, dismissing her with a glance. "Actually," Zoe interjected, her voice calm but firm, a steel core beneath the velvet as she efficiently saved her work on the laptop and began to pack her tools. Her hands, though, trembled almost imperceptibly. "The programming is complete. The car should be fully operational now." The three men stared at her, as if surprised she possessed the audacity to speak. Harrison's expression became even more condescending, his upper lip curling slightly. "Nathaniel, surely you're not paying premium rates for this?" He gestured vaguely in Zoe's direction, encompassing her, her tools, and her entire presence in his dismissive sweep. "There are plenty of qualified mechanics who could have handled this during business hours." "She is qualified," Nathaniel said, but his voice lacked the conviction, the defensive heat it had held mere minutes ago. He was faltering, wavering under their combined gaze. "I'm sure she's very skilled," William Morrison added, a slimy, ingratiating smile playing on his lips, one that sent a shiver of revulsion down Zoe's spine. "But this is hardly appropriate, having service personnel in your private space at this hour. What would the board think, Nathaniel? What would investors think?" He raised an eyebrow pointedly, his gaze sweeping around the opulent garage. Zoe watched, with growing hurt and utter disbelief, as Nathaniel visibly withered under their judgment. The man who had just told her she was extraordinary, who had held her hand and shared his deepest vulnerabilities, was vanishing before her very eyes, dissolving into a weak reflection of the man she despised. "You're right," Nathaniel said finally, his voice taking on the cold, distant tone she remembered from their first encounter. It was the voice of a man retreating into a familiar, safe shell. "It's been an exceptionally long repair." The words hit Zoe like a physical blow. They weren't angry or cruel, but precisely because of their bland, polite professionalism, they cut deeper. They reduced everything they had shared, every vulnerable moment, to a mere transaction, a business inconvenience. She snapped her laptop shut, the dry, echoing click reverberating in the sudden silence of the garage. Ms. Castillo, thank you for your services. Please submit your invoice through the usual channels. The clinical politeness was worse than his earlier rage. At least his rage had been honest. This careful dismissal, this reduction of their burgeoning connection to a simple commercial exchange, felt like the cruelest betrayal. "Of course, Mr. Brooks," Zoe managed to say, her voice remarkably steady despite the storm raging in her chest. She picked up her tool bag and laptop case, her hands trembling with suppressed fury and profound disappointment. "The car is ready. The diagnostics will show all systems operational." She moved towards the elevator, each step measured and dignified, a desperate attempt to maintain her composure despite the burning humiliation in her veins. As she passed the three men, Harrison took a step forward, subtly blocking her path. "In the future, young lady, I suggest you complete automotive work during business hours. Mr. Brooks is a busy man with important responsibilities." His tone was smug, dismissive. Zoe stopped, her entire body tensing. She looked directly at him, her dark eyes flashing with controlled fury, a fire that threatened to consume her. "In the future, Mr. Blackwell," she said, her voice low, dangerously calm, "you might want to research who you're dismissing before you open your mouth. But then again, men like you rarely bother with facts when assumptions are so much more convenient." "Excuse me," Harrison spluttered, taken aback by her audacity. "Zoe," Nathaniel's voice held a warning, a plea, but she no longer cared about his comfort, his desperate attempt to placate his peers. "Did you know?" she continued, turning her gaze to encompass all three men, her voice gaining a deadly quiet power. "Did you know that your friend here called every major repair shop in Manhattan today, and not a single one could fix his car? Did you know this Ferrari is one of only 5 in the world? And I'm one of only 3 people on the East Coast certified to work on its injection system." The men exchanged uncertain glances, their smug expressions faltering, but Harrison quickly regained his composure. "That's all very well and good, but did you know I've rebuilt engines for 3 Formula One teams, that I've restored classic Ferraris for the Peterson Museum, and that I charge $500 an hour because I am worth every single penny?" Her voice remained perfectly controlled, but the raw power beneath it was unmistakable, silencing them. "Or did you just see a young immigrant woman and assume I was here for some other reason?" The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with their stunned realization. Zoe looked directly at Nathaniel, her gaze piercing, and in her eyes he saw not just hurt, but the absolute definitive death of something precious. It was a quiet, heartbreaking goodbye. "The Ferrari is fixed, Mr. Brooks. I hope it serves you well." She turned towards the elevator, her finger hovering over the call button. "For what it's worth, I thought you were different. I thought perhaps you'd learned something today about not judging people by appearances." The elevator doors swished open, as if summoned by her profound disappointment. She stepped inside and turned to face them one last time, her expression a mask of weary resolve. "Apparently, I was mistaken." The doors hissed shut with a soft whoosh, leaving Nathaniel standing utterly alone with his suddenly silent associates in the now empty garage. The Ferrari sat there humming softly, its heart repaired by hands that had also been mending his own damaged soul, until he chose the familiar safety of his old prejudices over the terrifying vulnerability of a real connection. The perfect whir of the engine felt like a mockery now, a cruel reminder of what he'd sacrificed. "Well," Harrison said, finally breaking the stunned silence, his voice regaining its bluster, "that was unpleasant, though I must say she certainly has spirit." He chuckled, a forced, uncomfortable sound. Can we focus on Singapore now? Robert asked impatiently, checking his watch. This entire evening has been a waste of time. But Nathaniel barely heard them. His gaze was fixed on the spot where Zoe had stood moments before, the space now hauntingly empty. He realized with a sickening lurch that in trying to protect himself from the judgment of his associates, he had destroyed something infinitely more valuable than their good opinion. His perfectly repaired Ferrari now felt hollow, meaningless. She had returned his most valuable possession, but in the process he had lost something far, far more precious: her trust, her respect, and, quite possibly, the only genuine connection he had felt in years. "Brooks, are you listening?" Harrison's voice seemed to come from a great distance. Nathaniel finally looked at the three men, truly seeing them clearly for the first time. Harrison, with his casual racism cloaked as concern for reputation. Robert and William, with their shallow assumptions and their blatant ignorance. These were his friends. These were the people whose opinions had mattered more to him than the extraordinary woman who had just walked out of his life. "Get out," he said quietly, his voice dangerously low. "What?" Harrison scoffed, incredulous. "Get out of my home! All of you, now!" "Nathaniel, what's gotten into you?" Harrison demanded, stepping forward. "We need to discuss." "Singapore can wait. This cannot." Nathaniel moved towards the elevator, his finger jabbing the call button with desperate urgency. "I have to find her. I have to fix this." But even as the elevator began its descent towards the garage level, Nathaniel knew some betrayals cut so deep that all the money in the world couldn't buy forgiveness. Some trusts, once shattered, could never be fully repaired. The agonizing question gnawed at him. Had he realized this too late? The elevator seemed to move in agonizing slow motion as Nathaniel descended from the 42nd floor, each second a fresh torment. He was a caged animal, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes wild with a potent cocktail of panic and desperate determination. The polished marble lobby, usually a serene transition zone, felt like a chaotic antechamber as he burst forth with a desperate urgency. "Eduardo, the young woman, the lady, where did she go?" He practically demanded of the night doorman, a kind-faced man who had manned the front desk for 15 years and seen countless of Nathaniel's moods. "The lady in the green jumpsuit, Mr. Brooks," Eduardo replied, his brow furrowed with concern. He glanced at his monitor. "She hailed a taxi heading towards Queens. About 10 minutes ago, sir. You seemed upset." 10 minutes? Nathaniel exclaimed, the words a desperate gasp. 10 minutes in Manhattan was an eternity, enough time for someone to disappear into the vast urban sprawl. He fumbled for his phone, his hands trembling as he scrolled frantically through his contacts. He had numbers for senators, celebrities, world leaders, but not hers. Think, he muttered to himself, pacing a short, frantic circle. The Ferrari. She mentioned Castillo Auto Arts. Eduardo, do you have their contact? Of course, sir. Eduardo, ever efficient, quickly pulled up the information on his computer. But, sir, it's almost 10:30 p.m. They'll be closed. Nathaniel was already dialing, his thumb hitting the screen with furious precision. The phone rang 4 times, each ring a hammer blow against his escalating anxiety, before a tired, slightly wary voice answered. Castillo Auto Arts, emergency line. Marcus speaking. Marcus, this is Nathaniel Brooks. I need to speak with Zoe Castillo immediately. It's urgent. Nathaniel's voice was tight, barely controlled. A tense silence stretched across the line. Mr. Brooks, the Ferrari guy? Man, what did you do to her? She just called me crying, asking me to pick her up from a subway station in Manhattan. She never cries. Marcus's voice was laced with protective anger, his tone flat, accusatory. The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. Zoe, the strong, confident woman who had faced his earlier rage with such quiet dignity, was crying. Because of him. The thought twisted a knife in his gut. Where is she? Please, I need to apologize. I need to fix this. Look, man, I don't know what happened up there, but Zoe's been hurt enough by rich guys who think they can treat her like dirt. Maybe you should just leave her alone. Marcus's voice hardened, resolute. No, you don't understand. Nathaniel stopped, realizing Marcus was absolutely right to protect her. He took a shaky breath, forcing himself to choose his words with agonizing care. I was wrong, completely, unforgivably wrong, but I think I'm falling in love with her. And I can't let her think that what those men said represents how I feel. The confession, raw and unfiltered, hung in the air, astonishing even himself. Another pause. A longer one this time. You're falling in love with her? Marcus's voice was laced with disbelief, but the anger had softened, replaced by bewilderment. Yes, and I know it sounds insane because we just met this morning, but she's everything I didn't know I was looking for. She's brilliant, strong, and real, and I threw all of that away because I was afraid of what some small-minded men would think. His voice cracked, filled with a desperate urgency. Damn! Marcus's voice softened noticeably, a grudging understanding creeping in. She's at the 74th Roosevelt subway station in Queens. I'm on my way to pick her up now. Wait! Please, just give me a chance to get there first. If she still doesn't want to see me after I apologize, I'll leave her alone forever, I promise. Nathaniel's desperation was palpable. He could hear Marcus thinking, the silence punctuated only by the distant sounds of city traffic filtering through the phone. Man, you better not be messing around. Zoe deserves better. She deserves better than me, full stop. But I hope she'll give me a chance to become the man worthy of her. All right, Marcus sighed, a heavy sound of resignation and reluctant trust. I'll tell her my car broke down nearby. You've got about 20 minutes, but Brooks, if you hurt her again, I don't care how much money you have. We clear? Crystal clear, Marcus, and thank you. Nathaniel hung up, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He turned to Eduardo, his eyes blazing with a newfound resolve. I need my car, the Ferrari, right now, please. As Eduardo quickly placed the call for the Ferrari to be brought up from the garage, Nathaniel's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Harrison. What the hell was that, Brooks? We need to talk. Don't let a woman mess with your head. The Singapore deal is worth $200 million. Call me. You're making a mistake. Nathaniel glanced at the messages, his jaw set. Then he did something he had never, in his entire calculated life, done before. He blocked Harrison's number, then Roberts, then Williams. One by one, he systematically deleted the contacts of the men who saw others as less than human, who prioritized profit over empathy. A strange sense of liberation, raw and exhilarating, swept over him. The Ferrari purred into the lobby driveway, its engine a low, satisfied growl. As Nathaniel slid into the driver's seat, he caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. His tie was askew, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild with desperation. He looked nothing like the controlled, impeccably groomed billionaire who had started the day. He looked human, and for the first time he found that he didn't care. The drive to Queens usually took 45 minutes, but Nathaniel pushed the powerful Ferrari, devouring the distance in a blistering 25. The potent engine roared, a magnificent beast devouring the asphalt between Manhattan and his desperate second chance. His mind raced faster than the car, rehearsing apologies, trying to find words adequate for the magnitude of his betrayal. But every practiced speech felt hollow, inadequate. How do you apologize for revealing that you are exactly the type of man someone expected you not to be? How do you ask for forgiveness when you've proven your cowardice runs deeper than your alleged growth? The 74th. Roosevelt subway station loomed ahead, its familiar blue and orange signs a beacon of both hope and terror. Nathaniel parked illegally, not caring about tickets or consequences. For the first time in his adult life, money didn't matter. Status didn't matter. Nothing mattered but the woman he now saw sitting alone on a concrete bench outside the station entrance. Zoe had changed out of her emerald green blouse, now wrapped in a simple, oversized grey hoodie, as if she wished to disappear into the chill November night. Her head was bowed, and even from a distance, Nathaniel could see the dejected slump of her shoulders. She looked small and vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache with a profound, searing regret. He approached slowly, his expensive dress shoes clicking softly on the pavement. She looked up at the sound, and her expression morphed through surprise, then hurt, and finally a hardened, defensive blankness that cut him deeper than any anger could have. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was carefully neutral, drained of emotion, but he could hear the exhaustion, the deep weariness beneath it. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and to tell you that I'm an idiot." "Well, at least you got one thing right tonight," she said, rising and adjusting her bag on her shoulder. Her movements were stiff, guarded. "Marcus is coming to pick me up. You should go back to your important friends and your important business." "I sent them away." She paused, her hand tightening on her bag strap, her head tilting slightly. "What?" "I told them to leave my home. All of them." Nathaniel took a careful step closer, as if approaching a skittish, wounded animal. "After you left, I stood there, listening to them talk about Singapore and quarterly reports, and I realized something." "What?" The word was almost a whisper, laced with a fragile, dangerous curiosity. "I realized that for the first time in years, I felt alive today, truly alive, and it wasn't because of money or deals or power. It was because of you. Because you saw something in me that I thought was dead." His voice was raw, heartfelt. Zoe's eyes welled with tears, but she steadfastly refused to let them fall. She blinked them back, her jaw tight. "And then you killed it. The moment those men walked in, you became exactly what I thought you were this morning, exactly what I hoped you weren't." "You're right, completely right." Nathaniel's voice hitched slightly. "I've spent so many years building walls to protect myself that when it came time to choose between those walls and something real, I chose the walls. I chose safety over you. And it was the biggest mistake of my life." "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her voice thick with pain, the words barely audible. "You had your chance, Nathaniel. You had the perfect opportunity to show me who you really are. And you chose to show me you're just another rich man who cares more about what other rich men think than treating people with basic human dignity." The accusation hung between them like a physical barrier, cold and unyielding. Nathaniel knew he deserved every single word, but he also knew this might be his only chance to break through. "You want to know who I really am?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I just deleted every contact in here who thinks like those men. Harrison Blackwell, my business partner for 10 years, the board members who helped build my company, gone." He showed her the phone screen, almost bare now of the contacts that had once defined his social and professional circle. "That Singapore deal they were talking about, it's worth $200 million to my company. I just walked out of the meeting that could have secured it because nothing is more valuable than fixing this with you." Zoe looked at the phone, then slowly, searchingly at his face. "You deleted your business partners." Her voice was filled with a mix of shock and dawning realization. "I deleted people who couldn't see your value, who couldn't see that you are the most extraordinary person I have ever met." Nathaniel's voice grew stronger, more certain, fueled by his desperate plea. "You want to know what I learned today? I learned that I've been living half a life, surrounded by people who never challenged me to be better. You challenged me in one day. You made me want to be the man who deserves to stand by your side. Zoe, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I prove myself to be exactly the kind of man you've learned to avoid. But I am asking, begging for one more chance. Not because I think I've earned it, but because I think what we started today is worth fighting for. A taxi rounded the corner, slowing as it approached the station. Zoe looked at it, then back at Nathaniel, her internal struggle visible in every line of her weary face. "That's Marcus," she said softly. Nathaniel felt his heart plummet. "I understand." He steeled himself for the final goodbye. But then, as the taxi pulled to a stop and Marcus lowered the window, Zoe didn't move towards it. She stood rooted to the spot, her eyes never leaving Nathaniel's face. "Marcus!" she called out, her voice a little louder now, a hint of steel returning to it. "Give me 5 more minutes." Marcus looked from Zoe to Nathaniel, concern etched on his features. "You sure, Z?" he asked, his voice low, protective. "Yes, 5 minutes." The taxi, with a shrug from Marcus, pulled away, leaving them alone once more under the harsh fluorescent lights of the subway entrance. Nathaniel felt a tiny spark of hope, fragile as a candle flame in a hurricane. "Why?" he asked simply, the question barely a whisper. Zoe studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to read the truth etched in his features, searching for any flicker of deceit. "Because this morning, when you yelled at me, I saw a man controlled by fear and prejudice. Tonight in your garage, I saw a man capable of growth and real connection. And then, when those men walked in, I saw that scared man again." She took a hesitant step closer, and Nathaniel held his breath, every nerve ending tingling. "But now, standing here, seeing you chase me all the way to Queens, seeing you willing to sacrifice business relationships to apologize to me, I see something else." "What do you see?" he prompted, his voice raw with anticipation. "I see a man at a crossroads, and I need to know which man you're going to choose to be." The question hung in the air between them, loaded with the weight of the future they might or might not have together. Nathaniel looked into her eyes, seeing not just the pain he had caused, but the fragile hope she was still brave enough to offer him, despite everything. "I want to be the man who sees you clearly," he said, his voice gaining strength and conviction, infused with a new, potent resolve. "Who celebrates your brilliance instead of shrinking from it, who stands by your side with pride instead of cowering in cowardice. I want to be worthy of the woman who fixed more than just my Ferrari tonight." Zoe's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "That's what I want too." "But Nathaniel, if I give you this chance, if I open my heart to this possibility, I need to know you won't break it again the moment someone challenges you. Then let me prove it, not with words, but with actions. Every day, for as long as you'll allow me." He reached out slowly, tentatively, his hand extended towards hers. She remained silent for so long that Nathaniel's hope began to wane, his heart sinking, preparing for the inevitable farewell. But then, slowly, deliberately, she extended her hand and took his. Her touch was soft, yet firm, a promise. "One chance," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but resolute. "A real chance. But if you make me feel small again, if you choose their approval over my dignity, it's over, for good." "One chance is all I need," Nathaniel said, bringing her hand to his lips and gently kissing her knuckles, a silent vow. "One chance to show you that love isn't about hiding who you are. It's about becoming who you're meant to be." As they stood there under the flickering streetlights of Queens, hands clasped together beside his gleaming Ferrari, both knew this moment was a beginning. Not the easy beginning of a fairy tale, but the hard-won start that comes after mistakes and forgiveness, after choosing love over fear. The path ahead wouldn't be simple. There would be more tests, more moments where they would have to choose between the comfortable patterns of the past and the uncertain promise of something real. But for now, in that quiet moment, they had each other's hands and the courage to try. 3 months had not just flown by, they had soared, transforming the bustling Castillo Auto Arts workshop from merely a place of business into something far more profound, a true home. The morning sun of February 14th, Valentine's Day, streamed through the large, grimy windows, bathing the concrete floor in a warm, golden light. There, amidst the scattered tools, the gleaming engine parts, and the faint, comforting scent of oil and metal, something truly magical unfolded. Nathaniel Brooks, no longer confined to tailored suits, now sported a pair of deep blue overalls, perfectly matching the vibrant red ones Zoe wore. He extended a precision torque wrench towards her, his movements fluid, natural. 35 Newton meters, exactly, he said, his voice imbued with a reverence he once reserved solely for quarterly financial reports and market analyses. There was an earnestness there, a quiet satisfaction that resonated deeply. Zoe smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that crinkled the corners of her dark eyes. She accepted the wrench with graceful, practiced movements, her fingers already finding the precise bolt for the final adjustment on the Ferrari's intricate engine. Perfect! You're really getting the hang of this hotshot. The Ferrari 488 Pista, the very car that had initially brought them together in such fiery conflict, now gleamed between them, not as a symbol of their discord, but as a gleaming testament to their extraordinary collaboration. But this was not the same arrogant billionaire who had bellowed at a stranger 3 months prior, nor was it the same guarded mechanic who had built impenetrable walls around her heart. Nathaniel had fulfilled his promise, not just with words, but with actions that astonished them both. He had meticulously restructured his entire company, Dynasty Tech, replacing toxic, old-guard board members with diverse, forward-thinking leaders who genuinely shared his newfound vision. He had initiated a scholarship fund for young women in automotive engineering, personally mentoring 3 bright students, their faces lighting up with possibility under his guidance. Most importantly, he had learned to listen, to truly actively listen, not just to Zoe, but to the world around him, his eyes freshly opened to his own immense privilege and profound responsibility. "Remind me again why we're working on Valentine's Day," he teased, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer and cherished it deeply. "Because," Zoe said, expertly sliding out from beneath the car, a satisfied grin on her oil-smudged face, "some things are more important than dinner reservations. And because this isn't just any Ferrari anymore." She was absolutely right. Over the past month, they had secretly modified the car together, not for enhanced performance, but for purpose. Hidden neatly in the car's front trunk and rear compartment was a custom-designed, temperature-controlled storage and cooling system that would allow the Ferrari to serve as an emergency parts delivery vehicle for Zoe's new mobile mechanic service. This new venture aimed to bring specialized, on-demand automotive help to stranded drivers across all 5 boroughs, irrespective of their vehicle's make or their personal wealth. It was Nathaniel's idea, born from watching Zoe's face light up whenever she spoke about making automotive knowledge accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy elite. He had discreetly financed the entire operation, meticulously handling every logistical detail, but more crucially, he had insisted on learning the technical side himself so he could be her partner in every sense of the word. "System test?" Zoe asked, wiping her hands on a clean rag, her eyes bright with anticipation. "System test," Nathaniel confirmed, moving to the custom computer terminal they had installed against one wall. As the diagnostic program whirred to life, confirming that every modification was perfectly integrated, flawlessly executed, Nathaniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and a genuine, unrestrained smile broke across his face. "What is it?" Zoe asked, noticing his uncharacteristic grin. "Text from Marcus." He chuckled, shaking his head. He says, and I quote, "If you two don't get out of that shop and celebrate Valentine's Day like normal people, I'm staging an intervention." Zoe laughed, a rich, warm sound that filled the spacious garage. "He's right, you know. We've been working straight for 6 hours. It was worth it, though." Nathaniel stepped closer, still marveling at how naturally he fit into her world, how comfortable he felt in the greasy overalls, his hands stained with honest work. "Besides, I like working with my hands. Turns out it's incredibly satisfying to build something rather than just buy it." "Look at you getting all philosophical about manual labor," Zoe teased. But her eyes were soft with affection, a deep tenderness for the man he was becoming. The past 3 months hadn't been without their challenges. There were moments when Nathaniel's old patterns resurfaced, when his instinct was to throw money at a problem instead of seeking understanding. There were times when Zoe's walls crept back up, when trust felt too risky, too painful, but each time they chose to lean into the discomfort rather than retreat from each other. The true test came 6 weeks ago when Forbes wanted to do a major cover story on their unlikely relationship. The old Nathaniel would have either hidden Zoe away or used her as an accessory to burnish his image. Instead, he had insisted that any story focus on her expertise and her groundbreaking mobile service, positioning himself as the grateful student rather than the powerful businessman. "You know what I love most about this?" Zoe said, running a loving hand over the Ferrari's sleek scarlet hood. "What's that?" 3 months ago, this car represented everything that divided us. Your wealth, my assumptions about rich people, the way society teaches us to see each other as different species. She looked at him, her dark eyes shining with emotion, with a profound understanding. Now it represents everything that brought us together. A shared passion for excellence, respect for artistry, a willingness to get our hands dirty for something we believe in. Nathaniel reached for her hands, uncaring that both were smudged with honest grease. He loved it. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "That first day when I saw you touching my car, I was furious because I thought you didn't belong in my world. I was so wrong. It's embarrassing, frankly." He brought her hands to his chest, placing them over his rapidly beating heart. "You didn't belong in my world. You belonged in a much better one where talent matters more than bank accounts, where character counts more than connections. The question was whether I was brave enough to join your world." Zoe felt tears prick at her eyes, a warm tide of emotion that blurred the edges of the brightly lit garage. "And I'm still learning. Every day you teach me something new about what truly matters, about seeing people clearly, about a love that challenges instead of comforts, that pushes us to grow instead of letting us stay small." The workshop around them held the quiet evidence of their journey. Photos of successful repairs, glowing thank you letters from grateful clients they'd helped. On one wall, Nathaniel had hung his framed Harvard MBA next to Zoe's ASE Master Technician certifications, boldly declaring them equally valuable. "I have something for you," Nathaniel said, reaching into the pocket of his overalls, his voice husky with suppressed emotion. "If it's expensive jewelry, I'm throwing a wrench at your head," Zoe warned, but she was smiling, her eyes twinkling mischievously. "Better!" He pulled out a small velvet box, but instead of opening it, he handed her a folded piece of paper. "Read this first." Zoe unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the official-looking letterhead. Her brow furrowed, then her eyes widened in disbelief. "Nathaniel, this is the deed to the building. I bought it from its owner, but I'm signing it over to you. The workshop, the apartment upstairs, everything, it's yours, free and clear, no matter what happens between us." Her voice trembled with awe. "Why would you—" she whispered, overwhelmed, because you should never have to worry about losing your space, your sanctuary, because of rent hikes or gentrification or anything else. Because this place is where you shine brightest, and the world needs that light. He paused, his voice thick with emotion, his gaze unwavering. And because I need you to know that my love for you isn't about possession or control. It's about protection and empowerment. Zoe stared at the deed, the official document suddenly heavy in her hands, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the present. Not just its financial value, but what it represented: security, independence, profound respect for who she was and what she had built with her own 2 hands. "Now," Nathaniel said, gently taking the paper back and drawing out the velvet box, "you can decide about this without any pressure, knowing you are already complete and secure exactly as you are." He opened the box to reveal not a traditional diamond, but a stunning ring featuring a perfectly cut sapphire, the exact color of rich motor oil, encircled by tiny diamonds arranged to resemble intricate gear teeth. It was unique, unconventional, and absolutely perfectly her. "Zoe Castillo," he said, dropping to one knee right there on the oil-stained workshop floor, completely oblivious to his surroundings. "You didn't just fix my Ferrari. You fixed my heart, my perspective, my entire life. You taught me that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away. You showed me that true power isn't controlling others, but empowering them." Zoe's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp as tears of pure joy streamed down her cheeks, hot and unstoppable. "I know I'm not perfect. I know I'll probably mess up again, probably say the wrong thing or fall into old patterns. But I also know I want to spend the rest of my life becoming worthy of your love, supporting your dreams, and building something beautiful together." He held up the ring, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears, reflecting the soft glow of the workshop lights. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be your partner in every adventure, your student in every lesson, your teammate in changing the world one engine at a time?" For a moment the workshop fell silent, save for the distant hum of the city outside. Then Zoe dropped to her knees in front of him, pulling his face into her hands. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, then louder, joy flooding her every syllable. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." As Nathaniel carefully slid the unique ring onto her finger, both of them laughing and crying at the same time, the Ferrari's engine gave a spontaneous, soft purr, as if the car itself was celebrating their union. "You know what this means, right?" Zoe said, admiring the ring that caught the workshop lights like a scattering of stars. "What?" "You're going to have to learn to change your own oil. I don't marry men who can't maintain their own vehicles." Nathaniel threw his head back and laughed, a deep, uninhibited sound, pulling her into his arms. "Lucky me, I have the best teacher in the world." As they kissed there on the workshop floor, surrounded by the tools and dreams that had brought them together, car alarms began to blare outside, a symphony of horns and sirens that sounded suspiciously like celebration. "Looks like the whole neighborhood approves," Zoe murmured against his lips. "Wait until they find out about the mobile service launch next month. We're going to revolutionize auto care in this city." "We," Zoe repeated, loving the sound of the word, letting it linger on her tongue. "I like that word." 6 months later, their wedding took place not in some exclusive Manhattan venue, but right there in the Castillo Auto Arts workshop, bathed in strings of fairy lights and surrounded by the cars they had restored together and by the vibrant community they had built. Marcus, beaming with pride, served as Zoe's best man, while Nathaniel's was Miguel, a shy teenager from the Bronx whose scholarship fund had propelled him into studying automotive engineering at MIT. The guest list was a beautiful, unexpected blend of billionaires and mechanics, socialites and students, all united by the couple's shared commitment to breaking down barriers and building bridges. Harrison Blackwell, was conspicuously uninvited, but 3 of Nathaniel's former board associates were there, those who had embraced his transformation and joined his new venture capital fund, focused on supporting minority-owned businesses. As they exchanged vows under a whimsical canopy made of salvaged vintage car parts welded into an artistic arch, Nathaniel promised to love Zoe's strength, to support her dreams, and never again to let fear silence his integrity. Zoe promised to trust in his growth, to believe in his future, and to help him continue becoming the man her heart knew he could be. The Ferrari, now proudly sporting the elegant Castillo Brooks Mobile Auto Service logo on its side, served as their getaway car, but it carried them not to some exotic honeymoon destination, but to their first official service call, a broken-down school bus filled with children from a local community center who desperately needed to get to their field trip, because that was what they had become together. People who measured success not in dollars accumulated, but in problems solved, barriers broken, and hearts healed. As they worked side by side to get the bus running, their wedding attire protected by matching overalls, Zoe caught Nathaniel's eye and smiled, a profound contentment settling over her. "Any regrets?" she asked softly, adjusting a wire. He looked at her. The brilliant, beautiful, courageous Zoe, who had seen past his worst to believe in his best. Then to the cheering children whose day they had just saved. Then to the unique ring on his finger that marked him as belonging to something far greater than himself. "Only one," he said, tightening a bolt with perfect precision. "What?" "I regret it took me 38 years to learn that the best things in life can't be bought." He stood up, pulling her into his arms as the children cheered at their success. "But they can be earned, one honest day at a time, by someone brave enough to love you." The February sun set over Queens, painting the sky in hues of hopeful pinks and vibrant oranges, a breathtaking canvas of possibility. Somewhere in Manhattan, another arrogant billionaire was probably yelling at someone for touching his car. But here, in this moment, love had won. Growth had triumphed over fear, and 2 hearts that had started the year as strangers had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful destinations are reached by taking the longest possible road home. The workshop lights dimmed as the happy couple drove off in their newly christened service vehicle, ready to answer the next call, fix the next problem, and prove every single day that when love and purpose align, even the most impossible dreams become beautifully, wonderfully real. We want to hear your opinion about this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this plot full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you are watching from, and what score you would give this story from 0 to 10. A story that touched hearts. And if you enjoyed the storyline, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming up. See you next time.